Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be making a memory bear from Simplicity Pattern 8716. I love this pattern. It only has 2 pieces and requires only 4 pieces of fabric. I traced my patterns onto those plastic cutting mats you get from Dollar Tree. This is my mother's blouse. I'm going to be making a memory bear with this blouse. Isn't it beautiful? This is very hard for me, guys. This is my mom, Yvonne. She passed away April 28th, 2023. I was her caregiver. Her wishes were to be buried by her mama in West Virginia at Long Cemetery in Wetzel County, West Virginia. My grandma's name was Juanita. We made plans to travel to West Virginia in September of 23 with the funeral home there that had buried my grandma. The night before we were to travel to West Virginia, I received an email, not a phone call, an email asking if I knew where my grandmother was buried. The funeral home could not find her marker. To this day, the marker still has not been found. So I am in search of a nice place for my mom, and I think that we found it. But my mom was so sweet and giving. Everyone loved her that came in contact with her. I just miss her so. Before we get started on the construction of my mom's memory bear, I wanted to show you one that I built. I didn't want to make it if it didn't turn out right. So here is my Scrappy bear. Isn't he adorable? I used a feed sack to make him. He has some coffee stained cheesecloth around his neck. I added some buttons to the front, and I am going to add a lot more to him. I'm going to make him really scrappy. And I think I'm going to name him after my dad, Freddie. So he'll be my Freddie bear. But yeah, we'll add a lot of stuff to him. I think I made some mistakes as far as sewing the darts, but I think I've resolved those. But it's okay because he's just a scrappy bear, so it'll be just fine for him. But I wanted my mom's bear to be really nice. The first thing we need to do is deconstruct the shirt. I'll be using a seam ripper for that. And I have to make sure that I do it well because I have to have 2 pieces of each of these pattern pieces to make it work. If I find out that I don't, it's okay. Maybe the back will be a different fabric. We'll see. Because my mom was a small lady, so I'm not sure if I'll have enough fabric. I'm going to deconstruct this with the seam ripper, and I'll be right back. I did want to mention that I am going to try to save the collar. I would like to use the collar around the neck, and I am going to try to save these pretty cuffs to use on her arms right here. So I thought that that would be cute. We'll see how that works out. I changed my mind on the seam ripper because this shirt was sewn and then they took a serger and reinforced it with that. So you'll just take a pair of really sharp scissors, and then I have these that are easy on your hands. And I am just cutting at every seam, and that seems to be working just fine. And even though I wanted to it would take me 15 days. I'm not sure, but, and then here is the cuff that I was able to save. So I had those two, and I have the collar. And with these types of scissors, I was able to get a nice clean cut here. So I will continue with the scissors, and I'll be right back. I have my pieces all cut. I am going to add some interfacing. This is the Pellon 725R. It's a heavy duty Wonder Under, but it says that it is great for thick and thin fabrics, and then the fabric will retain its natural hand and will not become stiff. But this is, my mom's blouse is 100% polyester, so it's kind of thin, and it will be hard to work with if I don't put something on it. So I had this in my stash. So I'm going to go ahead and iron this on. Once I have this ironed on, I'll know if I have enough fabric or not. From the shirt, I was able to get all the pieces I needed, and I just had a little bit left. So maybe I can make something with these items. I have the cuffs and the collar. So we'll tackle those at the end. I love this vintage fabric. They're roses, and my mom loved roses. So we'll put this aside. And here are all our pieces with the interfacing on. My last piece, this was for the back. I had to sew together where the buttons were, which is fine because then I have some buttons. He'll end up with a couple of buttons on his bum, which I think will be really cute. And maybe some buttons up into here. This is where his eye is going to be. So that'll be fine. But the next step, oh, and then another tip I wanted to show you is I put a bee on each sheet so I would know. So like this is a back piece. And then when you're cutting out, you want to make sure if you're not folding over right sides together, you'll want to be sure to flip your pattern on the next piece. So for this one, we're going to trace around. These are notches, and I'll show you how I mark my notches. And these are the darts, and those get sewn together to give like a 3D effect, and I'll show you that as well. And here is another dart. So I have to figure out, because I have those buttons, where they are going to end up. But I want to make sure I don't have any buttons on this dart. So that's why I'm kind of moving things around here. I don't want any buttons where his eye is going to go. And I'm just kind of feeling where those buttons are. And then here's that dart, so we definitely don't want any there. So I'm just kind of moving around because I don't want to sew into a button. And then there is my dart for there. I've got a button far enough back here, which will be fine. This is where we're going to sew the two back pieces together. So I think this is going to be fine. So what I'm going to do is take my marker, and it doesn't matter what marker you use, because you won't be able to see the underside. So now we're going to start tracing right on the paper, and then I can tear this paper away after I cut. And then you'll just mark the darts. And then how I mark my notches, I just put a little mark in there. Everything is a 1/4 inch seam allowance on this pattern, which I love. And we're just going to mark around. This is a double notch. And you just mark all of your pieces and cut them out. I'm making little lines where the notches are. And what the notches will do is they will help us line up the pieces. And I just make little slits for those. I chose this pattern because it only had 2 pieces and 4 pieces of fabric, which made it easy for me. There are a lot of wonderful memory bear patterns out there. I even purchased a couple on Etsy, but there were so many parts. It was just overwhelming. Do this for all 4 pieces. Now remember, the next back piece, I'll be flipping this over. I'm going to trace all of my pieces, cut them out, and I'll be back. Here is one back piece cut out. And then where the notches were, I just made a small slit in the fabric so that I can match them up. These 2 slits in the back is where you'll leave an opening to put the stuffing in. Let me finish up cutting these out. I have my 2 back pieces all done. And I'm just making sure that it looks pretty good as far as matching. And the instructions say to sew along the back, straight down. You're going to leave a hole, and there are notches to indicate where that hole will be. It's right here. And I've just made little notches in the fabric. I'll also pin it before I sew. But you'll sew all the way down. Before I do that, I am going to sew my darts. And for the darts, all you do is right sides together. As such, just like this. Bring that triangle together. And you will sew from the bottom all the way up to the end of the fabric on each of the back pieces. And then there is a dart on the foot as well. Again, right sides together. And sew up. Just make sure they match, the points match, and you'll sew up a 1/4 inch all the way up off the fabric. I will do those 2 steps and come back and show you. I forgot to mention, before you do any sewing, make sure you take the paper off of the interfacing. You probably knew that, but I just wanted to tell you. I just wanted to show you, I sewed the dart, my first dart, and just a reminder, it's right sides together and all the way up until you have no more fabric, because you want to make sure you get the raw edges, and you'll just have a dart like that, a crease. We've got our darts all sewn according to the pattern. we're going to sew all the way up, leave a hole up to this corner. Basically, we're just sewing the back pieces together. I just finished sewing the side, and this is what, let's take some pins out, right? There we go. And this is the back of our bear. We do have a hole, and that's going to be for the stuffing for later. I did backstitch in here. And then when we're all done stuffing, we'll just do a ladder stitch and close up that back as such. Here is the back. So now we can work on the front. I like to do each piece one at a time, just so I don't get confused. And I will be back to show you when we start on the front. Many days later, I am ready to trace my pattern onto the fabric to make the front of the bear. We'll need two pieces. I have this piece and this piece. And when I go to trace it onto the other piece, remember we're going to flip it over. I'll trace it out and cut it out, and then I'll peel the interfacing paper off. I have both front pieces cut. Just remember where you marked your notches, you just make a slit so that you can use those notches. And then we have the darts cut as well. And then all we need to do is take off our interfacing paper. Mine did not stick very well, but I'm sure it is really old. So I think that's why I had challenges with it. There we go. Some of it stuck, some of it didn't, but we're going to make do with that. Let's see if we can get this one off. What we need to do now is we have two darts. We are going to, remember, right sides together and sew upwards. And that's what our dart will look like. That's on one of the darts. And then we'll do this one, right sides together. You sew from the raw edge this way. Put them together and sew until you run off the fabric. All right, those, you only have two darts in the front pieces. Now what we're going to do is right sides together, clip off some strings. I'm going to pin the long side together, and we'll sew all the way up this side. 1/4 inch seam allowance all along the side. We're going to clip some of those corners. Just don't go into the seam. Trim some threads. Now this is the front, and I think I am going to add a little patch before I sew the pieces together, before I sew the front to the back. I printed this image on my printer onto fabric, and it's Proverbs 31:28. Her children rise up and call her blessed, and then it has mother here, and I put my mom's name, Yvonne. And I'll cut this out, I'll put some batting behind it and sew it on the front of the bear. That is the front button. And I just have some batting on the back. It's nothing perfect. Once I get the bear stuff, then I'll come in here and fluff up the sides. What we need to do now, we cannot forget this step, is put some eyes and a nose on our bear. Take your front pattern, and there is a dot here. And just lay this pattern on here. We're going to need a pokey tool. I just have my awl here. Where this dot is on the pattern, just poke through there so we know where to put the safety eyes. And we will also need, did I do it right? Flip it over here. There we go, so we can see where the nose goes. So the nose will be right here, and we will need a hole about right here. It doesn't have to be perfect. And you don't want to put, even though you want the nose centered, you don't want to put it right into the seam. So we're going to go right to the edge of that seam. Just make a pokey, okay. And we'll have to make that hole bigger. But we have our holes for our eyes. I'll grab 2 eyes here. I'll link where I got these eyes, but you can get them at Hobby Lobby, I believe, because I had to run there and get some noses. Or get a nose. And then they come with these caps. Now I just had to find the hole that I made. There it is. It may or may not need to be enlarged, but I think I'll be able to poke that through. And this goes on like this, and you just push. I think that's it. It's not going anywhere. And then we'll put this eye in. Just poking it through like that. And we'll put the cap on like this. And just push until it snaps all the way. And now we have 2 eyes. We're going to grab a nose. We just have to find where we made that little mark for the nose. I think I see it. And if you need to, just bring the pattern in to help you. That's about right. And actually you can put it anywhere you want, but, and again, don't go into the seam, just go around it. And you may need to make the hole bigger. Just be careful snipping, because you don't want it too big to where it rolls around. It might be a little off center, but it'll be okay. That's what I always say, right? It will be okay. And our little bear has a nose. Now we're going to put our bear right sides together. pin centers, pin the bottom center, just seams together at the bottom. I like to fold over the seams opposite directions. And now just take your time and pin where you need to pin. Match up those notches. The notches will tell you where you need to be, so just look for your notches. Like here's a notch, and here's a notch. Go ahead and pin that because you know those should be together. I am going to go ahead and pin the rest of everything, and I'll be right back. I have our memory bear all pinned up. I'm going to take it to the sewing machine. Probably need a pin right there. We're going to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance. That's what is asked. That is what is required for the pattern. So we're just going to follow that. Make sure you take your time, go around the corners, slow down for those. Where you have, let's say, the armpit, you're going to sew up to here to make sure you get that 1/4 inch seam allowance and come back down. Okay? I will get this sewn up and I will be back to show you before I turn it out. Before we turn our bear inside out from the back, what we're going to do is go around corners and snip those corners up to the seam, all the way around where you have any corners. It's especially important in these tiny areas by the ear. Look and make sure that you didn't miss any spots. All right, I think I have everything clipped. All right, let's turn it inside out. Just reach in there. And let's see what we have. I believe that this is the easiest pattern out there. It's only 2 pieces. And because this is only the second time I've done it, yeah, it took me a little longer. But I think once I do a few more, it'll be nothing to make if someone needed a memory bear. Oh my gosh, you guys. I'm going to cry because I just love it. This is so special. Look at the little feet. And then what you'll do is get yourself whatever you use for a pokey tool. Get in there. Poke out all the corners. And what I also like about this pattern, look how flimsy this foot is because the interfacing did not stick. But what's really cool also about this pattern is if you wanted, you could make a patchwork bear because you could just use your scrappy quilt blocks, sew them together, and then cut out a bear that way too. So many possibilities, and then you don't have, I like some of those other patterns, but there's just so many parts. And for someone who's impatient like me, that would not work. But I love this pattern. All right, let's get in and poke those arms out. And you can see where the buttons are right here. If I had planned better, I could have got the buttons on the front, but that's perfectly fine. I kind of like how that is. Make sure you get up in the ears. How darling is that? The next step is we're going to put a little stuffing in the ear. and then you sew across right here. So there's not a separate earpiece. Just fluff it out. Take equal amounts from the back. Just put that stuffing in there to your liking. And then I'm just going to sew around. And again, you don't want too much because then you won't be able to sew in there. And you're just going corner to corner. And here's his little ears. Now we can go ahead and stuff the rest. I'm going to do his face and really get that full. Next, I will do the legs and then the arms and then really get his belly. And what you want to do is not use as much stuffing in the joints. That way they can move freely like Freddie's here. So just less stuffing here. I'll get that done and I'll be right back. The bear is complete. I love it. I did not... Remember I had the collar? I didn't add the collar because I didn't want it to take away from this. I may add some vintage ribbon later on. But I did add the cuffs, and all I did is I just sewed them so they would fit onto Bear's arms. And then here is the back. But I think she turned out really cute. What do you think? I'm so glad I got to finish it on Mother's Day. This bear means a lot to me. I miss my mom. I really miss her. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed today's video. And if you did, please subscribe, like, comment, and share. It would mean a lot to me. Until the next video, God bless.